Okay, so I'm going to try and talk very briefly too, and on the hope that there would be things that people would want to discuss. Does that make sense when it comes to AAD, the role of AAD versus AD? There are likely to be, or there possibly will be, people who want to talk about specific situations. So I'll just go through, give you a high-level view of how we see it, of how we see the strategy, and how we see our customers reacting. And then if we want to go deeper, we can. So, okay. I got a twofer. Yeah. So I didn't bore you by putting a slide on what AD is. Is that okay? Can everyone live with that? Okay. And I won't bore you with going into this. I think everybody knows what's happening. And there's a lot of it happening at once. Basically, the era has changed. There is this cloud era that we're in. Cloud technology is part of that era. Cloud threats are part of that era, right? The threats that the increase in professionalism of the attackers and the introduction of all of these new ways of attacking things. Meanwhile, our one's customers they have, what do they call it? The sort of homegrown IT, the shadow IT that starts using these external systems, whether the official IT wants them used or not. So suddenly people are, you turn around and we actually developed a product that would count how many of which external systems your users were using, and anybody who tried it was completely horrified. They had absolutely people were off in their projections of what kind of cloud systems were being used by their own employees by an order of magnitude. And so we saw all of this coming, and we said we need to actually, it's not a matter of sort of going in and what do we add next to AD. I mean, I went to Microsoft to start working on AD in 1999. And so we added stuff and we added stuff and we added stuff and we added stuff. But in essence, it was built to be a domain directory. In other words, within this closed confine, which you could control. In companies that didn't have to deal with a bunch of external relationships and external forces coming in. And all of a sudden we were in this new era. So our view was that we needed to address the new era and to help AD address the new era, but the way to do it wasn't to continue to building widgets inside AD on-premise. It was for us to embrace the cloud and start building the solutions for the cloud era problems in the cloud, to use the cloud to solve the problems that people were encountering. So we ended up with this system. I think a lot of people now are very familiar with what's in Azure AD as well, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. Basically, if you were a little greenfield organization with no intellectual property, you could go in and you could just build your own little Azure AD, what we call tenant, and start using it. It would do everything that you do in a regular directory like on-premise directory like Active Directory. But in addition, it has these ways of dealing with the cloud-based problems. It has the gallery has actually 2,500 pre-integrated cloud apps so that you can manage how your employees get into all of those cloud apps, not only how they get into Azure AD. It has ways of, you can use Azure AD to send traffic securely back onto premise, so that you can replace a bunch of stuff you would normally have to deploy on premise by putting things in the cloud. You can do the same sort of employee identity, credential, group management, and everything you can in Active Directory. One of the new things that you can do is you can use it as you can actually have all of your domain functionality through Azure AD as well. And we have this new component called AD Domain Services, where you can run something in the cloud. Let me back up a moment. A lot of people have a bunch of applications running which they would like to move into the cloud and run on virtual machines in the cloud rather than in their own data centers. But they're stuff that was written prior to the cloud. They're the sort of legacy things. And so they're very much tied into Active Directory, just as it always has worked. Well, now there's a component of Azure AD, this Azure AD Domain Services, that looks exactly like an AD domain controller, so that you can run those applications in VMs in the cloud. Yeah?
Does Azure AD Domain Services work with federated accounts without password sync?
Does it work with federated accounts?
Federated directories?
Federated directories without password sync. Well, the domain controller itself it doesn't do federated. You don't put ADFS onto. You don't set up ADFS inside the. Yeah. Yeah, because you don't. In other words, you don't need to do the federation at that level. You can do the federation at other levels.
Can I go from Kerberos via SAML to Kerberos automatically without having passwords synchronized into Azure AD?
Well, okay, I would have to see the exact use case, because there's a lot of moving parts in there. To go from SAML to Kerberos, to go from Kerberos to SAML is easy because you're gaining more resolution. To go from SAML to Kerberos is hard because you're going from a whole language to a single word. And so I can't give you so the question I would have to ask you is, which word are you using? But anyway, so we could talk about it. I invite you to contact me and we can talk about that, the specifics of that. Okay. The other thing is that Azure AD allows you to do these big new things that have to be done, like manage, as your customers all become they want virtual relationships with your enterprise. That becomes a huge part of what everybody has to deliver. You need to be able to manage your digital identities with your customers, and that starts to become really key. And you'll probably start maintaining resources related to your customers, and those have to be protected properly. And so the whole question of having professionalized support for your customer identities is just as important in the long term as having professionalized support of your employee identities. And so Azure AD is where we developed all of these capabilities of supporting your customers. Clearly, one of the reasons is the question of scale. A lot of even small companies have very large numbers of customers. But it's also because the customers themselves are using devices and so on, which represent problems that are easier to solve in the cloud too. So, putting those two things together, what about AD on-premise? Well, AD has been traditionally used for different environments. One is sort of just the regular corporate environment to manage employee systems and applications. That's the biggest use case. Some people have used it to manage identities and so on for partners, vendors, and consultants. And there are a lot of specialized applications, for instance, in high security environments. For example, health systems, where you need to be able to have the doctors getting into the emergency room even if the power goes out, even if there's no internet connectivity. Everything has to be resilient within a local environment. So these high security and reliability environments, Active Directory has been very, very successful there. High sensitivity environments where you want to be able to physically control access to anything, be absolutely certain who is able to gain admission to even the rooms where the machines are operating, and so on. In isolated and low connectivity environments, we do, for example, they're used on many of the world's submarines, perhaps almost a huge percentage of the world's submarines, because, you know, it's obviously they're going to lose internet connectivity for a few minutes every now and then. Okay. So, for all of those reasons, a lot of those reasons are not going to go away, right? You're not going to, in my view, you know, we're not going to see an end to high security reliability environments. We're not going to see an end to super high sensitivity environments. We're not going to see an end to isolated or low connectivity environments. So some of the fundamental capabilities that Active Directory has are not transient. They're long-term things that are going to be with us, I would say, forever. So AD on-prem still has a critical role to play. I would say that one of the things that happened in the adoption cycle of cloud is many people said, gee, what am I going to do in the cloud? Well, do I have to move my basic employee management into the cloud? Well, why do I? I mean, there's nothing to force me, to require me, given how busy I am, to take my current daily systems that work just fine, thank you very much, and move them into the cloud. And so the first thing that people wanted to look at was how you use the cloud to solve the cloud era problems that they have no solution for. They don't know how to solve those things. And it's only later, as people go through the experience of how many simplifying assumptions occur when you start using the cloud, that then people start to think, well, we can actually gain a lot by taking some of these changes in operations and changes in the way things are built and using that for our regular employee management too. So some of the on-premise AD requirements will go away and can be replaced by using cloud. On the other hand, some organizations will never perhaps be able to leave on-premises, those in high sensitivity and so on. And the truth of the matter is, because of the mix of applications and the massive penetration of all this stuff, hybrid will be around for an awful long time. By hybrid, I mean use both of cloud and on-premise. And so what we did when we developed Azure AD was to say right from the beginning, we're going to differentiate our cloud offering by making it a hybrid thing, something that it works on its own, but it also reinforces the value of AD and is tied into it, and the two of them create a synergy. And what we really want is a way that we can manage both of them in one place so that we have no replication or duplication of management effort, no additional source of problems in governance because you have two places where things are being managed and all that kind of thing. So, in this sense, our strategy has been and remains that we support a hybrid world where we understand that there are use cases for Active Directory running in various modes, some modes where it's completely isolated, some modes where it's tied into the cloud and can benefit from cloud services. So I've more or less gone through this, which is just here are the people with these critical systems and here are the people with no legacy, et cetera. And so we can kind of summarize what our thinking is by this. We started with this position where people were on AD. They were able to synchronize information into the cloud and deploy then things like Office 365. But our vision is that because of the fact that we have all of these other cloud era problems, Azure Active Directory becomes a more and more powerful component in the equation, and that if anything, in many instances, the synchronization, the direction of synchronization would be from Azure Active Directory into AD in order to hydrate. You know, in my own imagination, I even think of it as being that you could think of OnPremise AD becoming over time something virtually stateless that gets hydrated out of the cloud, but then turns it into this thing with this resiliency and this ability to function when in isolated environments and so on. When the submarine goes down, it's able to continue to function. When it comes back up, it's being hydrated through the cloud and resynchronizing. So, but once again, the important thing here is that this arrow is bidirectional. So our vision is that the customer would be able to put that where they want. They could drive the cloud-based side of things from their on-premise, or they could drive ultimately the on-premise from the cloud-based things. And that allows them to make this overall evolution. So in terms of what you would approach, you're trying to do these things like reduce your TCO and so on. To do all of this, you don't need to abandon AD. Our view is you can use the ability of AAD to work with AD and then surgically choose what it makes most sense to run in the traditional fashion and what you should move into cloud management. So I think I'll leave it there, and then we can turn to questions, but no questions as complicated as that one. We need one step down. No, it's a very good question. It's just, it is complicated. Let's start, we'll work up.
Questions? Okay.
Yeah.
In this hybrid mode,
Yeah.
then, is it hybrid without the need for federation?
Is it hybrid without the need for federation?
So
And if you had no federation between, you mean between on-premise and the cloud?
Yes.
You see, I kind of think of the relationship between on-premise as the cloud as a matter of projection. Now, so I don't know what you mean by federation. It could mean, federation can mean two things. You could be talking sort of high-level strategic sense, or you could be talking protocols. What are you talking? Your protocols. Yeah, you do not have to federate. One of the things that we can do is to do, I'm actually rather proud of this. You can do the equivalent of password sync, except we don't sync the passwords. We sync a hash of the passwords, but it's not simply a hash of the passwords. It's a hash of the passwords with salt that is specific to that particular AD on-premise relationship. So it doesn't turn into a very nice Microsoft-generated password attack machine. It's actually something that it's entirely safe. And one of the most interesting things that I saw recently was it's sufficiently, you know, I don't know if anyone noticed this, but or came to my keynote, but in the keynote, I showed just a screen of this new mechanism we have where we take the signals from, for example, all of the leaked passwords, all that are posted into the dark space, and then we run those against the password hashes in Azure Active Directory. And so we can produce reports for the tenant administrators saying, these people had their passwords compromised in the last 2 weeks. And you know, like it's really shocking when people first start to get those reports, because beforehand, of course, there was no way to do that. But if you think about it, we could actually, and I hope to see us do this. I think it's on the schedule for some time. I'm just an architect. Schedules are beyond my level of competence. But because of the architecture of the password hash sync, you can actually verify whether anybody's passwords on-premise have been compromised as well. So anyway, that's a good example, really, of how cloud and on-premise can reinforce each other, and of how we have invested equally in both on-premise and cloud. If you look at our analytics, all of we've come out with a whole series of analytics for Active Directory, which analyze the network traffic and use machine learning. Perhaps a number of people with Active Directory have already seen this, but it's using machine learning and all of the latest stuff that we use in the cloud in order to see if people are attacking Active Directory in the local on-premises situation. So that's what I mean by hybrid, really. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I have a question. I think maybe some people might be confused about the password sync and the federation. And maybe this will clear it up. If I have a hybrid environment with some domains in Active Directory and some in AAD, and the users are kind of logging in and using resources across that environment, can I log in to either side and function the same way? In that, can I have a forest across AD and AAD and function in the same way, regardless of where I log in?
I wouldn't, no, that isn't the way we do, well, the problem here is that you can set it up in several ways, okay? So one way you can set it up, is that the truth lives on-premise. And then it federates using actual federation protocols with the cloud. And the cloud is a relying party STS, and then it converts the token that it gets from your on-premise into a new token that can be used across the cloud and for any piece of software that takes advantage of the cloud. So that on-premise password is driving the local STS that then drives the cloud STS. And so yes, you end up being able to use or take advantage of that password anywhere in the system. Similarly, you could log into the Azure AD. If you set it up differently, some people don't want to do all of that stuff around federation. They would prefer to have the same accounts, same account names and so on, but just replicate these hashes of passwords. Now in that case, you can log in, your login point becomes the cloud, and so you can go around and you can access all of the things that accept the cloud tokens, and we're able to take the cloud tokens and through this gateway back into on-premises, those that authentication can be used to access on-premise. So you actually have bidirectional connectivity of the end user to the resources that they want in both cases. But the underlying, for anybody who is crazy enough to be interested in the underlying identity protocols, the actual steps that are being used are different, but the net result for the user is the same. Does that make sense? And so,
Yeah, I think that's what I was.
but a lot of people, like I personally hate password synchronization. I've been against password synchronization since day one, and so that's why I say I'm very pleased with the way we ended up with this mechanism of doing this hash synchronization. So it satisfies all the different requirements.
So you mentioned identity management terminology in the presentation, and I know we're talking about Active Directory. However, I have to ask that question. So are you doing anything with the joiners, movers, leavers, and governance, or are you still leaving that to the vendors that are, because it kind of looks like you're expanding to that world as well. I'm trying to figure out how the hybrid solution is going to look like.
Well, I'm going to give you my view, and my view is always right. So, the kind of really professionalized governance technology, for example, that a company like SalesPoint, for example, and do I have to compliment IBM? I love IBM. No, look. People, there are people who are going to put more IQ, because it's really a question. You need IQ, and you need lots of attention to the detail of particular environments. There are people who are going to do that better than Microsoft. And so we love that. We love those people. And we want those people we're trying to build a platform that is a source of utility for the entire world and a source of wealth for everybody in the industry. So, we love the idea that you could get, the most professional compliance capabilities possible running on top of our platform. We, of course, will provide compliance capabilities up to a certain level, but there will be the need for specialization, and we support the specialization. If anybody is interested in moving in that direction, please don't think we aren't open or enthusiastic about having your, providing ways for you to do that for us. Not for us, for our mutual customers.
How do you see the competition with players like Okta, Centrify? How do you differentiate from them?
Well, we have 96% of the authentications, and they have 0.5% of the authentications. So that's the main way that we
okay,
differentiate.
But more from a functional standpoint than a market share standpoint.
Oh. Do you want me to say something good about Okta?
Be honest.
No, come on now. I've been in spiritual study for many years, so I should be able to rise to this occasion. No, anybody who makes a customer's life better is doing good work, and we support that. Okay, and that includes even people who denigrate us and say that we're not doing a good job. That doesn't bother me really. I've already been there. So. Yeah, Okta has. I don't like their go-to-market. It's extremely aggressive, not only towards us but towards many other people in the industry. So I don't like that. But I think they do provide good service for the customers who adopt them. So, yeah, in that sense, they're welcome on top of our platform. Do I think that they are offering? I'm not convinced of any capabilities that they have that we don't have, and I'm not convinced, in other words, that they're doing a specialization above the platform level. So something like governance really is a specialization. Does that make sense to people? That it's a...
Makes sense to me.
Uh-oh.
Is it a question? Possibly it's going to be a discussion about it. I like the question especially, and I'm having my own view as well. So
yeah.
I think those companies filling just a gap other customers don't want to fill up, Microsoft does a good job providing a platform, but in some cases, it leaves it to some partners and vendors which then, need to do programming against the API. And as an end customer or a company, I don't like to do that. So that's where this space is filled by companies like Okta, because I'm kind of, I'm missing stuff like, you're having your 2,500 or 4,000 app gallery, whatever it is, but it doesn't help me to provision. That's my own problem.
Yeah,
and that's exactly where those...
Yeah, I just don't want to be misread, because we're really happy to have people like that filling the gaps that we're leaving. On the other hand, we are also inevitably going to fill a lot of those gaps. And so as we do that, we try and help our partners, fill the next set, because, we have one team that's working to create new gaps and the other teams that are filling the old ones. So there's always lots of opportunity in this world, but we used to say people are moving up the stack, right? And I agree with you. And there have been gaps in some of our things some of our mechanisms have been too hard to use. And Okta has focused on some of those areas and developed a good solution for the areas that were too hard to use. And so, and I congratulate them for that. Yeah.
So, Kim, I want to thank you very much on behalf of the audience for enlightening us on the mysteries of AD and AAD, and so that we don't get ADD. And it's also
that's unfair. You've been working on that one.
I knew I had to get ADD in here somehow. And it's been fun to talk with you again about multi-master replication and federation. And it's great to see new things coming into the cloud, but some of the technologies and the patterns that we've been familiar with still having relevance, and the life goes on. So what I think we should do now is let the official part of the panel come to a close, and let the people that are anxious to go down to the closing keynote gracefully depart. And we'll give Kim a big hand, and then we'll see if we have any follow-on after discussion.
Thank you.